Welcome to Michael Potts F1. Everything Formula One, but from a photographer's point of view. Round 10, British Grand Prix, Silverstone. Before I show you the first set of photographs, I just want to say that everyone involved is absolutely fine. Here is that sequence from my vantage point. That dramatic crash lasted 6 seconds. Pierre Gasly clipped the back wheel of Zhou Guanyu's car, triggering a series of collisions. Zhou's car lifted into the air, flipped upside down, and then spun like a top as it careered across the gravel into the tyre wall. As the race started, I focused on the first two cars, Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a puff of smoke in the midfield. I changed focus in time to see Zhou's car being lifted into the air. Then I managed to track it as it spun, sparks flying everywhere. It flew past me and then collided into the tyre barriers behind. As soon as this happened, we all rushed to see if there was anything we could do to help. Luckily, the marshals were on hand, and although he got stuck in a very, very difficult space, they were able to extract him without any serious injury. Seeing what had happened, George Russell climbed out of his stricken Mercedes and ran over to see if there's anything he could do to help. It was a very dramatic and very terrifying incident, and I'm exceptionally thankful to the marshals who were there. When I arrived to position myself for the start, I spoke to them about where would be a safe place to shoot from. Initially, I wanted to shoot from behind the fence, because this gives you a perfect symmetrical view of the start. But thankfully, the marshals advised that that wasn't a particularly safe space to be. But instead, I shot from a much safer position, slightly to the side and underneath the Formula One TV tower. It was amazing that Zhou managed to walk away from that unscathed. One innovation that undoubtedly saved his life was the halo. The halo is the metal cage that sits on top of the car, and it protects the driver's head. This was introduced thanks to campaigning by John Surtees. Surtees is the only man to have won both Formula One and MotoGP titles. His son tragically died in one of the junior category races and probably would still be alive had the halo been fitted to his car. The halo has already saved many drivers' lives, including Lewis Hamilton's. But here is a dramatic example of how effective it is. This photograph shows the damage sustained to the Alfa Romeo. As you can see, the roll top is completely destroyed, and it was only the halo that was keeping Zhou's head safe. Formula One safety has improved dramatically over the years, but it's still incredible to see everyone survive such a horrific incident. Sebastian Vettel. Silverstone is steeped in history. The track featured in the first Formula One championship in 1950. Throughout the years, there have been many magical moments. Sebastian Vettel recreated one of those on the morning of the race. Here he is driving Nigel Mansell's championship-winning Williams from 1992. The old car thundered around the racetrack. The only difference was this time it was running on carbon-neutral petrol. It still had the same roar and growl it used to have, but now much more environmentally friendly. Lewis Hamilton. I took this photograph of Lewis getting into his car during free practice 1. There's been a bit of post-production on this one. I've isolated Lewis and blacked out a lot of the noise in the background. This really lets you focus in on him, and it makes his helmet stand out. There's a new edition of a pride flag, which echoes the design that he was racing towards the end of last year. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise attended the Grand Prix on Sunday. I got this photograph at the podium as he was waiting to congratulate the winning drivers. What struck me was no matter how many people were gathered around him, he was always completely at ease, taking time to take selfies with people, flashing his winning smile constantly. He really does smile that much in real life. It's always great to have an opportunity to photograph somebody so successful. Keanu Reeves. This race had a double dose of Hollywood royalty. On Saturday, Keanu Reeves was there to witness qualifying, looking a little bit more disheveled than he did during his Matrix filming. Lewis Hamilton. Silverstone is one of those tracks, one of those old tracks that doesn't actually use corner numbers. It's a bit like Monaco or Monza, where no one refers to turn 1 or turn 2, but uses the track corner names. I took this photograph of Lewis as he's navigating the sequence of corners known as Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. The first corner in the sequence is named after Maggots Moor. The second corner, Beckett's, was named after a medieval chapel that stood at the site. The chapel was built in memory of the murdered Archbishop of Canterbury. Before being a racetrack, Silverstone was a World War II airstrip. The straight known as the Hanger Lane is a reference to that period. In this shot, Lewis is coming over a slight rise. There's a puff of sparks behind him, and in the background you see ominous grey clouds. Silverstone has very, very changeable weather, and anyone who's watched Wimbledon will know that the weather in England in July is incredibly unpredictable. Carlos Sainz. That unpredictable weather was felt during qualifying. There was a massive downpour at the start of the session. Luckily, this time I was prepared with a raincoat and a waterproof cover for my camera. Carlos Sainz was the best to navigate the treacherous conditions and came home to claim his first ever pole position. It was a remarkable drive in very, very difficult conditions. Lewis Hamilton. This is a photograph of Lewis leaving the pits at the end of free practice 1. There'd been a downpour during the start of the session, leaving most of the drivers to seek shelter in the garages. As things cleared up, Lewis was the first to emerge. This shot gives you a great sense of drama as the sun's glistening on the watery tarmac, almost silhouetting the car. George Russell. This is George Russell's first home race as a Mercedes driver. Public support has really ramped up for George, and it was great seeing how he interacted with the crowds. This photograph was taken during the drivers' parade. Before the start of the race, the drivers do a lap of the track to wave and greet the fans. Here, George has stopped at club corner and is waving to the fans in the grandstand, who went absolutely wild. Andrea Schlager interviewing Fernando Alonso. What's interesting about this photograph is Andrea and Fernando have recently started dating. I would love to have known the questions that she was asking him. They first appeared together at the Miami Grand Prix, so this is still a bit of a novelty for everyone. Pierre Gasly. This photograph was taken down the hangar lane during the race. It made the background completely blurred, but I've managed to keep a little bit of detail in the car. It gives you a sense of the speed that they're travelling at this point. This is just before the braking zone coming into Stowe Corner. I'm using the new Nikon Z9, which is a mirrorless camera. It's absolutely fantastic to do slow shutter speed panning shots. The difference between this new mirrorless camera and an SLR camera is that you don't have the blackout that you have with an SLR. The SLR works by letting you view your subject directly through the lens, and when you take a picture, the shutter lifts, blacking out the viewfinder. When you're shooting at a third of a second, that can make things quite difficult because you lose your visual reference for a very, very long time. With mirrorless, however, the viewfinder is electronic and doesn't actually black out, so you're able to see the vehicle through the entire pan. This allows you to track the vehicle throughout the shot, giving you much more consistent panning shots. It's a real game changer. Ferrari. Ferrari appeared to have the race won for Charles Leclerc. Bit of a quick recap. Carlos was on pole position. Max managed to overtake him, but then suffered technical difficulties. Ferrari then used team orders to let Charles get past Carlos. Everything looked set for an easy victory. However, there was a late safety car, and Ferrari opted not to bring Charles in to change tyres. Where he was on the track when the safety car was announced only gave the team 11 seconds to decide whether to bring him in or not. They opted to stay out and keep track position. His teammate and the drivers behind all went in and changed tyres. So at the restart, Charles was on old rubber and everyone else was on new, fresh tyres. That gave them a massive advantage over him. It turned out to be a strategic blunder. Charles had the opportunity to win the race. The safety car bunched the field up. At the restart, we had some of the most dramatic racing of the whole year. The lead changed a number of times between Charles, Carlos, Sergio Perez, and even Lewis Hamilton. He managed to overtake 2 cars to take the lead at one point, to the utter delight of the fans. Carlos Sainz. Eventually, it would be Carlos who would come out victorious. In his 150th race, he managed to claim his first ever victory. There was such emotion as he climbed out of his car and raised his hands aloft. It's great to see someone so happy winning a race. Second was Sergio Perez, who had a phenomenal drive. At one stage, he was almost at the back with a puncher, and he managed to fight his way through to second place. And third was the local hero, Lewis Hamilton, who at one point looked like he might win the race, Charles Leclerc. Unfortunately, where there's winners, there's also losers. And for yet another race, Charles has snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. You feel he's had almost an entire career's worth of bad luck this season. There have been so many unusual situations that have prevented him from winning races this season, from mechanical issues to poor strategy calls to bad judgment. Charles's first half of the season is definitely a story of what could have been. Thank you for watching my 2022 British Grand Prix race review. It was an action-packed race weekend. Despite that heavy crash at the start, all the drivers escaped unharmed, and will be ready for the next round in Austria. If you've enjoyed this, please give the video a like. There'll be many more to come.